A brutal, bone-jarring kick shatters the opulent silence of the grand ballroom. A heavily pregnant woman instantly collapses onto the polished marble floor, and the glittering crowd watches, frozen in a tableau of shock. Champagne flutes slip from manicured hands, crashing into shards of crystal, and the aggressor, a man fueled by arrogance and entitlement, smirks, absolutely certain that no one in this elite circle would ever dare challenge him. But he has no idea that he has just laid a hand on the wife of Ethan Vega, the most powerful and feared man in the entire state of Virginia. In a matter of hours, this scene of dazzling wealth will crumble into ruin. Arrogance will give way to frantic regret, and every single one of the family's dark secrets will be dragged into the unforgiving light. What began as a cruel, public humiliation is about to spiral into a high-stakes war of power, bitter revenge, and a desperate search for redemption. Where are you watching this story unfold, and what time is it where you are? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more deeply emotional stories that expose the hidden truths of the world. Part 1. The Golden Cage. Olivia Miller stood on the balcony of the old Vega estate in Middleburg, Virginia, gazing at the sprawling fields of blooming lilac and clover. It was the early days of a humid June, and she often wondered if this mansion, steeped in centuries of old money history, would ever truly smell like the warmth of a home. The late afternoon sunlight rested gently on the stone balustrades. She pressed a hand to her swollen belly, feeling the rhythmic, patient flutter of the life inside her. In that spring-like calm, a phrase that had been needling her since the first week of marriage returned, sharp and clear. Don't you forget, you carry the Vega name now, and that is a very heavy weight. Eleanor Vega, her mother-in-law, had delivered the line with a polite, almost pleasant smile that was colder than the shadows under the estate's porte-cochere. Olivia wasn't one to argue. She respected that the Vega legacy and its accompanying rules came from a long line of tradition. But sometimes, tracing the aged railing with her fingers, she thought the weight of a powerful name shouldn't crush the warmth of a simple kitchen, the rich smell of brewing coffee, or the sound of shared laughter. Her quiet, internal mission was simple: to make this vast house a true home, not by raising her voice or breaking rules, but through sheer, quiet patience. Outside, the small town of Middleburg seemed like a kind neighbor, a place where people greeted each other with a polite, "Good evening, ma'am," where children's whispers filled the town square, and the gentle clinking of porcelain in the local diner seemed to soothe the soul. Inside the Vega mansion, however, the order was unnervingly perfect, and conversation was sparse. The walls were lined with portraits of ancestors whose expressions were utterly unreadable, and the thick Persian rugs seemed to absorb even the footsteps of the staff. Olivia had bravely placed a pot of vibrant red geraniums in the kitchen window, hoping their fiery color would challenge the prevailing solemnity. She had also bought a lemon poppy seed loaf from the local bakery for Ethan's breakfast, though he rarely got to taste it, always rushing off to his high-powered finance meetings in Richmond. Still, she waited for him, leaving the slice covered under a glass dome, a small, renewed hope every morning. Ethan returned that evening with his phone halfway lit, his tailored blazer draped over his arm, his glance quick and distracted. "Honey, I'm being called to New York City. Early meeting. I'll be back in time for Isabella's gala, I promise," he said, giving Olivia a rapid kiss on the forehead. She caught his hand, holding it for just a second, like slipping a sweet note into a pocket. "Please be careful," she replied, her voice soft but sincere. He nodded, checked his watch, and was gone in a whirlwind of briefcase, keys, and measured steps. Olivia stayed, listening to the echoing silence, and promised herself that tonight, at least, she would play soft jazz in the living room, something to remind herself that joy existed, even when no one was looking. While she tidied up at the formal dining room, Eleanor appeared, effortlessly measuring the air with her aged elegance. "Olivia, Isabella wants something truly worthy of the Vega family name. We have many distinguished guests. I'd appreciate it if you remained composed. Discreet, you know," she said, as if discreet meant the same thing as invisible. Olivia offered a polite smile. "Of course, Eleanor. I'll be wherever I'm needed." But inside, she wished someone would ask what music she preferred, or if the linen tablecloths should be mixed with wildflowers. Her heart belonged to the small things that truly connect people. A timely glass of water, a chair moved closer without asking, a glance that made room for another soul. The sky shifted from amber to rose, and the house took on the muted sound of pre-party preparation, the fine dust being roused by staff movements. In the kitchen, the caterers spoke of the menu with clockwork precision. Imported prosciutto, tiny quiches, chilled gazpacho shooters, Pinot Grigio cold but not iced, and a small carafe of herbal tea for those who preferred it. Olivia stepped closer to thank them. "Thank you for everything, ladies. It smells wonderful." One of the senior staff, a kind woman from Charlottesville, responded with genuine warmth. "Anything you need, ma'am." That small, easy gesture warmed Olivia, because in this house, please and thank you were often treated like museum pieces, precious, rarely touched. Upstairs, she chose a simple ivory maternity dress and slowly fixed her hair. Not out of vanity, but out of a need for peace. She remembered her mother in their small apartment kitchen in Georgetown, spreading butter on toast, saying that true grace was knowing how to look without hurting anyone. Olivia held that memory close, like touching an inherited handkerchief. Then, she sat down to write 2 lines for Ethan. She wasn't sure if she should leave him a note or trust he would return in time. "I miss your voice in this house," she scribbled, and folded the paper. Undecided, she placed it in the nightstand drawer. She walked out to the patio. The scent of honeysuckle was a gentle presence resting on the flagstones, and she sat for a moment, letting the pregnancy demand a pause. She heard the near laughter of a gardener talking to a lemon tree, and farther off, the distant buzz of the city preparing for the summer gala season. She realized the outside world knew how to celebrate even the quiet act of waiting, and she pressed her lips together, storing that lesson deep in her soul. Returning inside, the ballroom gleamed like a ship anchored in stillness. Olivia checked the glassware, the cutlery, the linens, and the flower arrangements, a simple ritual that saved her from feeling adrift. Suddenly, she touched her abdomen. The baby responded, a reassuring presence. "Calm, my love, I'm right here," she whispered, realizing she was speaking softly so as not to wake the portraits. The punctilious grandfather clock announced the hour with a discreet tick, and the house seemed to hold its breath. Then, the main door opened, pushed by a butler carrying boxes of decorations and a set of engraved card invitations. Olivia collected them by instinct. On the corner of one envelope, etched in gold script, was a familiar name, and a shiver of presentiment touched the back of her neck. The air temperature changed, just barely enough for a single petal to detach from the vase and drift, with ceremonial slowness, onto her stomach. She let it rest there, like a seal, sensing that something, still small and indefinable, was waiting behind the curtain of their routine. Later, she crossed the hallway with the serenity of a woman who knows her way of being is to make no noise, and yet, to set deep roots. She recalled Eleanor's cruel phrase and decided not to fight the weight of the name, but to learn to balance it, like a dancer balances a rose in her hair, with both grace and an unbreakable core. She opened a window to let the evening air in, and with it came a humble, domestic hope that bolstered her spirit. She didn't ask for grand gestures, just a simple place at the table, a conversation without calculation, a sincere, How are you, really? Standing there, leaning slightly into the future, she began to hear, without realizing it yet, the sudden, ominous drumbeat of the night to come. On the dining table, a golden invitation lay waiting. Isabella Vega's birthday gala, the State Capitol Ballroom, Richmond, VA. Olivia took a deep breath. Something deep inside told her this night would change everything. "It's just for a couple of hours, honey. Just smile, and it'll be fine," Ethan had said before he left. But she knew that fake smiles faded faster than 4th of July fireworks. Part 2. The fall. The night arrived with the brilliant glow of the city lights reflecting off the downtown towers, and the State Capitol Ballroom, illuminated by warm spotlights, seemed to breathe like a living palace, filled with footsteps, the rustle of silk, the soft strumming of a classical guitar, and the clinking of glasses. Olivia descended from the sedan carefully, her ivory dress brushing the ground, one hand on her belly and the other clutching a small clutch bag containing only a tissue and her silent phone. They were greeted by soaring ceilings, a courtyard of columns where the water of a fountain gently struck a stone basin, and the low, composed murmur of a curated party, people talking quietly to feel important. Isabella, Ethan's sister, appeared like a movie star, impeccable updo, a dramatic crimson velvet gown, a heavy gold cuff bracelet. She offered 2 air kisses that barely touched Olivia's cheeks. "You look lovely, Olivia. I'm so glad you came," she said, adding almost without pause, "The serving staff is a little short tonight. You know how it is. Would you mind just helping with a few trays? Nothing major. A quick pass through the patio and then you can sit." Olivia smiled with practiced obedience. She noticed how several guests turned their heads to size her up, but she replied with a genuine ease, "Of course, Isabella. Whatever you need." In her view of family, helping wasn't a humiliation. It was support. But with every step, her ivory gown was subtly shedding the status of a guest and moving closer to the invisible uniform of the help. A headwaiter placed a tray of wine glasses in her hands, the pale Pinot Grigio vibrating with the music's rhythm, and she advanced slowly, as if walking on water, her back straight, her belly shielded by her forearm, her heart beating a discreet gallop. As she passed, she caught the scent of freshly carved prosciutto, fine perfume, and that mixture of pride and scrutiny with which certain people look at everything they don't recognize as their own. A group of men was laughing near the arches, and at the center of the huddle stood Senator Damon Vargas. Crisp white shirt, brilliant cufflinks, a tight jaw, and an air of absolute superiority that cut the atmosphere like a razor. Olivia extended a glass with a polite air. "Good evening." The powerful businessman barely glanced at her. "Mine should be ice cold and clean," he replied, enunciating each word. The tone of a man who commands, not asks. She nodded, turning the tray slightly to offer another glass. A minimal, simple misstep. The slight brush of her shoulder against the marble edge of a nearby table was enough to displace a drop of wine, a tiny red spark that jumped onto the man's pristine shirt front. It wasn't a cascade, nor was it a noisy blunder. It was a minimal accident, but it was enough. The group's silence became a knife. Someone cleared their throat. The background guitar seemed to rise and fall like an asthmatic chest, and Vargas stared at the purple spot on his shirt as if it were a mortal wound. "Do you have any idea what this shirt costs?" he snapped, his teeth clenched. Olivia tried to apologize. "I'm so sorry, truly. Let me get you a napkin, right away." She moved her arm to lower the tray, but his reaction was so rapid that the scene seemed to split in two. A moment of air, a moment of stone. The man stepped forward with that lukewarm aggression often mistaken for authority, and spat a toxic comment. "You can't even serve a drink right? What a pathetic standard." The men around him didn't laugh. They also didn't intervene. They remained fixed, like the portraits back at the mansion. And then, the unimaginable happened in a palace, at a party, on an elite night. Vargas's foot lashed out with sudden violence in a dry, calculated kick, without warning, aimed directly at Olivia's side. A clumsy, cruel punt that completely destabilized her. There was no blood, no ear-shattering scream. There was only a dull thud, the blow against her body, and then against the floor. A stifled gasp lodged in her throat. A slight crunch of glass as two flutes kissed the tiles and shattered into transparent petals. The serving tray rolled like a metallic moon until it stopped against a column. And the music, for an instant, seemed so far away it belonged to another city. Olivia's hands flew to her belly instinctively. The air escaped in short, shallow gasps. Her eyes blurred with the glare of the spotlights. Her mouth tasted of iron and fear. She heard a contained "oh" from some woman. The hiss of someone saying, "Shh." The glacial voice of a man who muttered, "Don't make a scene," and the rustling steps of indifference, skirting her body on the floor as if she were a misplaced piece of luggage. Isabella, just a few feet away, had pulled out her cell phone and held it with the screen lit at chest height. The blue light made her cheekbones look harder. "Calm down, everyone. Please call housekeeping," she commanded, as if only a spill of punch had occurred. One guest whispered if the girl was all right. Another replied, "Yes, she's pregnant, but she looks strong." The blow, more than physical pain, carried the moral violence of feeling that, in the heart of an ancient beauty, under ceilings that had witnessed coronations and embassies, a pregnant woman could be treated as a mere obstacle without the entire room catching fire. Olivia tried to rise, but her body wouldn't obey, and her shame less so. She had spent her life learning not to be a burden, to solve problems alone, and that lesson now pierced her like a dangerous shard. "I'm fine," she managed to say. Nothing happened, but her voice came out thin as thread, and then she heard another, rougher, but human. It was the head waiter, Carlos, who approached with a cloth, hesitating. "Ma'am, please allow me." Though his eyes flickered toward Vargas, seeking permission, the senator didn't even look at him. "Get her out. She's staining the floor," he snapped, and someone chuckled softly to accompany his cruelty. The tension became immense, a glass dome on the verge of cracking. And if the palace didn't collapse, it was because pain, sometimes, demands silence to negotiate with dignity. Olivia closed her eyes for a second, gripped her belly, felt a slight movement from the baby that anchored her to reality, and opened her eyelids again with the chilling clarity of someone who knows she must protect two lives with a single breath. The echo of the impact raced through the arches, climbed to the carved wooden ceilings, faded in the courtyards, and returned as a rumor. And suddenly, a murmur of cameras reached her. Not press spotlights, but the ordinary cell phones that watch everything with an insatiable hunger, some to be scandalized, others to send to their group chats. The smell of wine mixed with broken glass on the floor had an elegant nausea to it. And Olivia, who had never asked for help aloud, desperately searched for a hand that did not come. The fear was not just for her, but for the tiny life she carried, for her mother's promise not to expose it to a single minute of malice. "Excuse me," the maitre finally said, with a minimal, almost administrative courage. "Let her breathe. We need to call a doctor." And Olivia silently thanked him for that phrase, which opened a crack of humanity. But before anyone could move, a young server set a tray on a nearby table and knelt down without asking permission. His waiter uniform was still damp from the courtyard humidity, his eyes clear. "Ma'am, please don't try to stand. Take a deep breath. I'm right here," he whispered, and the tone returned to Olivia a kind of foundation that the marble floor denied her. The rest of the room, however, maintained its discipline of pretense, The guitarist started playing again. Someone raised a glass with a hurried toast, and the hostess, Isabella, stepped back slightly so her camera could capture the perfect frame. The woman on the floor, the ivory dress, the broken glass, the powerful senator framed by historic arches. The anecdote ready to be told with a calculated lie. Olivia wanted to utter her husband's name. She knew that if she could manage to say it, her mouth would fill with strength, with the promise of return and home. Olivia, on the ground, clung to her belly as her breathing fractured. Only the young waiter, Carlos, rushed to her. "Ma'am, please, don't get up." Her eyes filled with tears. "Where is Ethan?" Part 3. The call in the storm. The rain was now lashing the cobblestones outside the Capitol building as Olivia, trembling, dialed her husband's number. The water soaked her ivory dress, the same dress that an hour ago had been a symbol of elegance and now clung to her skin like the fabric of defeat. The lights from the street lamps reflected in the puddles, turning the streets into broken mirrors. Ethan's voice, rough with shock, answered the call. "They hurt me. The baby. I'm scared." The tears mixed with the rain, and the metallic sound of passing cars reminded her of the glass shattering on the ballroom floor. In her mind, the false laughter of Isabella, the looks that pierced her like needles, and Vargas's foot that had sent her crashing down with absurd violence still resonated. A few feet away, under the awning of a closed tavern, the young waiter who had helped her approached with an umbrella that barely held against the wind. It was Carlos, and his face showed a mix of anger and compassion. "Ma'am, please come. There's a cab here," he said, raising his voice to cut through the storm's roar. Olivia shook her head, still holding her belly. "I just want to leave. I don't want anyone else to see me," she murmured. Carlos insisted gently. "You have to go to the hospital. It's not good for the baby." She looked up, her eyes wide, dark, shining with panic. "I don't have my wallet now. I left my clutch." And he, without hesitation, replied, "I'll pay for the cab, ma'am. Don't you worry." That simple phrase was enough to make Olivia let out a sob. Not of fear, but of relief. Because someone, finally, was treating her like a person. When the taxi pulled up, the driver, an older man with a mustache and a kind southern accent, rolled down the window. "Where to, darlin'?" Carlos answered quickly. "St. Jude's Medical Center, please, and fast." The man opened the door, glancing at Olivia. "Take it easy, sweetheart. Everything's gonna be fine." Olivia fell into the back seat, soaked, her hair plastered to her forehead, her lips trembling. The smell of leather and gasoline made her slightly dizzy, and she rested her head against the window, listening to the constant drumming of the rain. Carlos got into the front seat, still holding the dripping umbrella, and the taxi started, cutting the water on the road with a roar. Inside the car, Olivia clutched the phone in her hands. The screen glowed with her husband's name, and when she heard his voice, the tension snapped. "Olivia, what happened? Are you okay?" Ethan asked, his breathing ragged on the other end. "They hit me," she said, the words coming out slowly, as if they weighed tons. "It was that man, the one in the white shirt. He shoved me, and no one did anything. No one." A dense silence covered the call. Then, Ethan's voice changed. It became hard and precise, the voice of a man who would not allow fear to govern his home any longer. "Listen to me, Olivia. Go to the hospital right now. Don't drive. Don't walk. Stay put. I'm calling the doctor. I'm getting on the first flight back." "But your meeting," she managed to say, and he cut her off with a tone that mixed fury and love. "Forget the meeting, love. Nothing is more important than you and our son." The taxi turned onto the main avenue. Outside, Richmond seemed like a blurred watercolor, the lights of the bars and balconies filtered by the curtain of rain. Olivia placed her hand over her belly. The baby moved, a brief tap, as if responding. Carlos turned his head and offered her a tissue. "Here, ma'am," he said with an honest shyness. She accepted it, grateful, and squeezed it between her fingers, unsure what to dry first. The tears or the fear? "Thank you, Carlos," she whispered, and he barely smiled. "Don't worry. All of this will pass." At that moment, thunder split the sky, and the taxi shuddered. The entire city seemed to be holding its breath. Olivia looked out the window and for a second thought she saw Isabella's reflection in a shop window, phone in hand, still recording. She closed her eyes, wishing to erase the image, but the pain in her side brought her back to reality. "Ethan," she repeated softly, like a prayer. The driver spoke with his warm accent. "Take it easy, honey. St. Jude's is close. My wife gave birth to our 3 kids there. Good doctors, you'll see." That simple sentence restored a thread of confidence. Humanity always arrives from the least expected places. When they arrived at the hospital, the clock on the dashboard read 11:30 p.m. The rain was still falling hard, but the white lights of the entrance seemed like a sanctuary. Carlos got out first, opened the door, and extended his hand. "Easy now. I'll help you." Olivia got out carefully, feeling her legs tremble. A security guard approached when he saw them. "Is everything all right?" Carlos answered quickly. "She's pregnant. She took a hit." The guard nodded and called the emergency room on the intercom. Inside, the smell of disinfectant reminded her of her mother, a nurse in a small hospital, always saying that white walls are meant to soothe the soul. A young nurse received her with a serene voice. "Relax, ma'am. Sit here. We'll attend to you right away." Olivia obeyed, her gown soaked, her lips pale. Carlos stayed in the hallway, watching from a distance, hands in his pockets, as if afraid to intrude. Part 4. The vow. As the doctor examined her abdomen with the ultrasound wand, the sound of the monitor filled the room. Beep, beep. The baby's heart was beating strong. "Everything looks good," the doctor said, smiling. Olivia exhaled the breath she had been holding for minutes. "Thank God," she murmured, tears falling uncontrollably. "But you need to rest, ma'am. You've had a big shock. Can you call your husband?" She nodded, tried to dial the number again, but her phone died. The nurse offered her a charger and a cup of hot water. In the hallway, Carlos waited. When the doctor came out, he immediately stood up. "Is she okay?" "Yes, everything seems fine thanks to your help," the doctor replied. The young man lowered his gaze, blushing. "I just did what anyone would do." But deep down, both knew that wasn't true. That night, in a palace full of luxury, he had been the only one who hadn't looked away. Olivia, now on a gurney, listened to the echo of the storm fading. She thought of Ethan flying toward her, the hours that separated them, and the fear that had been transformed into a cold determination. She didn't want to live with shame. She wanted her son to be born into a world where a blow was never met with silence. She closed her eyes, letting exhaustion wrap her like a warm blanket. Carlos peered in for a moment to say goodbye. "I'll come back tomorrow to check on you," he said in a low voice. Olivia smiled faintly. "Thank you, Carlos. I'll never forget what you did tonight." He made a clumsy gesture with his head and left into the calming rain. Olivia was left alone, listening to the monitor's beep and the footsteps in the hallway. She looked at the white ceiling and whispered once more, "Ethan, come soon." Outside, the water continued to fall, washing away the city's dust. The rain was cleaning Richmond, but within Olivia's heart, the remnants of fear and broken dignity still lingered. She knew that call had changed something forever. Somewhere in the sky, a plane was taking off heading south. Somewhere in time, the life that had been hers until now was receding to make room for another. Ethan received the call mid-meeting in New York, in a glass-walled conference room, where he could see the rain sliding down the windows. Olivia's voice, broken by tears, still vibrated in his ears when his phone fell onto the table. "They hurt me. The baby. I'm scared." The words were branded onto him like hot iron. The executives surrounding him continued to talk about figures and contracts, but the noise of their voices dissolved into a distant hum. "Gentlemen, the meeting is over," he said, with a tone that brooked no argument. He grabbed his briefcase, his jacket, and crossed the building's lobby with long strides without looking back. His assistant tried to stop him. "What about the signing, Mr. Vega?" Ethan replied without turning around. "It no longer matters." In the car, as the driver maneuvered through traffic, Ethan dialed his wife's number again and again. No answer. JFK Airport was saturated with people. Wet umbrellas, cold lights, advertisements for happy destinations. He walked through the crowd with a rigid face, driven by a single idea. Get to Richmond, see with his own eyes that Olivia and his son were alive. At the boarding gate, while waiting for the night flight, he saw a video pop up on his phone, sent from an unknown number. The title was simple: The Capitol Gala Incident. Ethan opened it, and his heart stopped. There was Olivia, in her ivory dress, kneeling on the floor, and the man in the white shirt, Vargas, looking down at her with pure contempt. In the distance, Isabella's frozen laugh and the glare of cell phones. The kick was repeated over and over, without music, only the dry thud of the foot against his wife's body. Ethan closed the video, the tremor in his hands almost imperceptible. He put the phone in his pocket and looked out the plane window as the engine started. The lights of New York dwindled, but inside him, a storm that knew no rest was growing. When he landed in Richmond, it was almost 2 a.m. The air smelled of wet earth and honeysuckle. A car was waiting for him at the airport, and as soon as he got in, he gave the order: St. Jude's Medical Center. The driver recognized him and said nothing. Ethan watched the dark streets flash by, the streetlights reflected on the pavement, the shadows of the trees that seemed to accompany him. He remembered the last time he had seen Olivia at home, standing by the window, touching her belly, with a fragile smile. It pained him to realize how many times he had prioritized work over the peace of his home. At the hospital, the emergency room hallway smelled of disinfectant and old coffee. The fluorescents flickered with a continuous hum. When he asked for Olivia, a nurse asked him to wait. "She's under observation. The baby is fine, but she needs rest. She suffered a severe emotional impact," she explained. Ethan nodded silently, pressing his lips together. He walked toward the waiting room and sank into a metal seat. Through the ajar door, he saw Olivia's profile asleep, one hand over her belly, the other resting on the sheet. A monitor marked the steady rhythm of a tiny heart. At that moment, a young man approached him, his uniform soaked and his face tired. "Are you the husband?" he asked. Ethan looked him up and down, recognizing the waiter from the video. The young man swallowed hard. "I found her on the floor. No one was helping. I took her to the cab. I couldn't just leave her there. I'm sorry, sir." Ethan stood up, extended his hand, and squeezed it tightly. "Thank you," he said, and there was no tremor in his voice, only a contained gratitude. "What's your name?" "Carlos, sir." Ethan nodded. "I owe you." Carlos looked down. "You don't owe me anything. Just make the people who did that pay for it." Ethan didn't respond. When the nurse allowed him in, he approached the bed slowly. Olivia's face was pale, her lips dry. He leaned down and stroked her damp hair. "I'm here," he murmured. "You are not alone anymore." She barely opened her eyes. A tear slid down her cheek. "The baby!" "He's fine, love. He's fine," he said, his voice breaking. They stayed like that for a long time, without words, only the synchronized breathing of the two of them, and the monitor's sound like a heartbeat of hope. Later, Dr. Morales entered with a folder. "Mr. Vega, your wife needs absolute rest. She can't endure any more stress, and you should get some rest too." Ethan nodded with a brief smile, but his mind was already elsewhere. When the doctor left, he walked toward the window. Outside, Richmond slept under the rain. The rooftops shone like black mirrors, and the distant sound of a guitar mixed with the thunder. Ethan turned on his phone again, replayed the video, and paused on Vargas's face, frozen in a sneer of contempt. In that instant, he knew exactly what he was going to do. There would be no shouting or scandal. He wouldn't seek out the press. He knew a more effective language, the language of power. From that moment on, Vargas would not sleep soundly again. He closed his eyes for a moment and took a deep breath. He realized he didn't feel rage, but a chilling clarity, a purpose. The images of Isabella, laughing, holding her phone, of his mother watching without lifting a finger, pierced him like knives. Family shame would no longer be his burden, but theirs. He turned toward Olivia. He saw her sleeping, her hand still over her belly. A gesture of protection, even in sleep. He sat beside her, took her hand, and spoke in a low voice. "I promise you, none of this will go unpunished. Not for revenge, but for justice, and for our son." The hours passed slowly. The hospital was a suspended world, where the night is measured in beeps and time becomes liquid. Ethan stared at the ceiling, the cold lights, the faces of the nurses coming and going. Every detail seemed part of a revelation. He had believed that protecting his family meant keeping them away from trouble, but now he understood that the true danger had been inside his own house. When dawn broke, the Richmond sky was tinged with a soft gray. The doctor re-entered and handed him the medical report. "She can go home in a couple of days, but she needs peace." Ethan nodded and stood up. In the inner pocket of his jacket, he kept a small notebook where he had written everything down. Name, company's affiliations. The decision was made. Before leaving the hospital, he looked at Olivia again. The monitor continued to mark the constant rhythm of the life they carried within. He kissed her forehead and whispered, "Rest, my love." Then he crossed the hallway, the sound of his footsteps mingling with the murmur of the rain. Upon reaching the main door, he paused and looked at the sky. The clouds were slowly opening, letting through a band of golden light. It was dawn, but for him, it was something else. The beginning of the end. Outside, Richmond seemed to awaken without knowing that this morning, nothing would ever be the same. Ethan raised his gaze to the horizon and pronounced calmly, like someone dictating a sentence, "Tomorrow, everything changes." Part with the reckoning. The next morning, the Vega estate in Middleburg was enveloped in an uncomfortable silence, as if the very walls sensed that something was about to break. The sky over Virginia was still overcast, the air heavy with the humidity that precedes a storm. In the main dining room, the aroma of fresh coffee and toasted bread tried, and failed, to mask the tension. Eleanor Vega slowly scanned the newspaper, feigning indifference. Isabella scrolled through her phone, her nails perfectly painted, her expression haughty. Neither of them knew that Ethan was already on his way, and that the day would bring more than simple reproaches. The main gate opened with a dry thud. Ethan's footsteps echoed down the marble hallway, firm, measured. He wore the same dark suit from the night before, without a tie, his gaze clear, a leather folder under his arm. The butler barely had time to announce him before he crossed the threshold of the dining room. Isabella looked up and offered a nervous smile. "Ethan, what a surprise. We didn't know you'd be back so soon. And Olivia? I hope she's better." He looked at her for a few seconds, long enough for her to understand that this was no time for pretense. "Olivia is fine, thank God," he replied, and took a seat at the far end of the table. The silence descended again, interrupted only by the ticking of the wall clock. Eleanor set the newspaper aside. "Son, you look tired. Did something happen?" Ethan looked at his mother, then at his sister, and opened the folder. "Yes, Mother. Something very serious happened. Something that should shame all of us." He placed a series of documents on the table. Official seals, contracts, balance sheets. Isabella frowned. "What is this?" He didn't answer immediately. He picked up a coffee cup, held it between his hands for a few seconds, and then spoke with a calmness that stung. "It's the truth, the one I never wanted to use against you, but today you have left me no other choice." Isabella let out a nervous laugh. "I don't understand what you're talking about. If it's about last night, it was a misunderstanding. Olivia got nervous and Vargas—" Ethan raised his hand, and his voice sliced the air. "Don't say his name in front of me. I saw the video, Isabella. You recorded it, didn't you?" She froze, the color draining from her face. I just wanted to—" "You wanted what? To humiliate her? To show the world that your sister-in-law doesn't belong with this name?" Eleanor intervened with a trembling voice. "Ethan, please, lower your voice. We are not enemies here." He looked at her with an old sadness. "Maybe not, Mother, but last night you acted like it. Neither you nor Isabella lifted a finger to help my wife. You left her alone, abandoned on the floor, pregnant, while a coward kicked her, and you stood by watching. Do you know what that means to me? That the Vega name, which you are so proud of, is stained, and I'm going to clean it, even if I have to destroy it first." The words echoed off the walls like thunder. Isabella abruptly stood up. "You can't talk to us like that. We are your family." Ethan rose slowly, his height casting a shadow that covered her completely. "Family? A family doesn't measure a person's worth by their origin, nor does it film a woman's humiliation for the entertainment of guests." He opened the folder and spread the documents in front of them. "You see this? These are the shares of the Vega Group. I bought them 5 years ago, in silence. Everything, from this house to the companies that bear our name, now belongs to me." Eleanor paled. "That's impossible, your father." "My father knew," he interrupted, "and he asked me to wait for the right moment to reveal it. That moment has arrived." Isabella took a step back, her phone slipping from her hands. "What are you going to do?" Ethan took a deep breath. "Set things right. As of today, your credit cards are canceled, the family accounts are suspended, and the contracts with Senator Vargas's companies were annulled this morning. Not one more dollar will leave our hands to fuel the arrogance of a criminal." Isabella pressed her hand to her chest, incredulous. "You can't do that. You'll ruin everyone." Ethan observed her coolly. "Not everyone, Isabella. Only those who have forgotten what it means to have dignity." He walked toward the window, where the timid sun was beginning to filter through the clouds. "For years, I played the obedient son, the compliant brother, because I thought love was earned that way. But love is not bought or imposed. It is demonstrated, and you wasted it." Eleanor stood up, her hands trembling. "Ethan, please, don't talk to your mother like that. All we did was protect the family name." He turned slowly and looked at her with bitter tenderness. "Protect it from what, Mother? From the kindness of a woman who only wanted to be accepted? From the child in her belly who, according to you, didn't have pure enough blood? No, Mother, you didn't protect the name. You turned it into a mask." The silence that followed was so heavy that the humming of the lights could be heard. Ethan collected the folder, closing it with a sharp click. Isabella tried to approach, but he raised a hand, not in threat, but in distance. "Rest easy. You won't lack a roof or food, but you will no longer have the power to destroy what you don't understand. This house will be a home again, or it will be nothing." Isabella, her voice broken, whispered. "And Mother?" Ethan looked at Eleanor steadily, his eyes tired but firm. "She will also learn what responsibility means." Then he turned toward the door. His shadow lengthened over the marble floor, and with every step, the air seemed to clear. Outside, the Richmond sky began to open, letting through a clean, new light that illuminated the glasses, the portraits, the antique objects, as if the sun itself wished to purify everything. At the threshold, Ethan paused for an instant. He heard the distant sound of church bells, marking noon, and for the first time in a long time, he felt he was breathing without a burden. Behind him remained the murmurs of a broken family. Ahead, the certainty that justice, though delayed, had just begun. Without looking back, he stepped out onto the patio, where the lilacs still held droplets of rain on their leaves, and he thought that even nature knew when it was time to clean out what was rotten. Part 6. The Architect of Ruin. In his office overlooking the James River, Ethan watched as the city slowly awoke, the rooftops still damp, the timid sun filtering through the clouds. The glass of the windows reflected his tense face, a mix of exhaustion and resolve. He had spent the night awake, reviewing contracts, reports, and accounts. Each document was a piece of a chess game he had been preparing for years without telling anyone. On the desk, a folder bearing the name Vargas and Associates waited like an old enemy. Ethan took a sip of his coffee. The bitter taste reminded him that it was time to move. "Richard," he said, and his lawyer entered immediately. Dark suit, discreet expression. A man accustomed to executing orders with surgical precision. "I want all contracts with Vargas's companies reviewed. Suspend them, all of them, without exception. I don't want a single dollar from our firm in his hands." Richard nodded, without lifting his gaze. "Do you want this to be public?" Ethan shook his head. "No, not yet. Just make sure that when he tries to lift a finger, everything is frozen. Banks, suppliers, licenses. Let his world stop, but without him understanding why." The lawyer took notes with swift handwriting and left the office. Ethan remained standing by the window. From there, he saw the river moving slowly, the first commuters walking across the T. Tyler Potterfield Bridge, the baristas preparing the terraces to serve coffee and breakfast. Everything seemed normal, but inside him, there was a dangerous stillness, a calm that only precedes action. He remembered the words of Carlos, the young waiter who helped Olivia. "Everyone pretended not to see." That phrase hurt him more than the assault itself, because it had painted his world with brutal truth. For years, he, too, had pretended not to see. He had let gestures, humiliations, and veiled comments slide. He believed that staying above the fray made him stronger, when in reality, it only made him an accomplice to the contempt his wife was now suffering. The phone on his desk rang. It was his secretary, Lucia, her voice nervous. "Mr. Vega, Senator Vargas is in reception. He says he needs to speak with you urgently." Ethan sighed and looked at the clock. "Send him in." Vargas entered with the same arrogance that characterized him, though his face no longer held the glow of the parties. Dark circles marked his skin, and his voice, though still loud, had a fissure of insecurity. "Ethan, we have a problem. This morning I was notified that my accounts are blocked. The banks aren't responding, and I've received contract cancellations including yours. This must be a mistake." Ethan watched him without moving, arms crossed, eyes unblinking. "There is no mistake, Damon. Your accounts are exactly where they should be. Paralyzed." Vargas frowned. His tone changed. "Are you punishing me for a trifle? There was a misunderstanding. I didn't know who your wife was. It wasn't a big deal." Ethan leaned toward him, resting his hands on the desk. "You pushed her to the floor, you insulted her, and then you kicked her while everyone watched. And now you tell me it wasn't a big deal?" Vargas tried to laugh, a hollow sound. "Don't exaggerate. I was drunk. It was a lapse. There was no malice." Ethan spoke slowly, each word loaded with ice. "I don't care about the intention. The damage is done, and now you will pay for every second of that humiliation." He straightened up and walked to the window. "Respect, Damon. It is earned. It is not bought with money. You confused power with the right to scorn others." Vargas clenched his fists. "You can't sink me like this. I have friends, contacts, and you need people like me." Ethan turned his head, a chilling calmness in his smile. "No, Damon. You are the one who needs people like me, and you don't have them anymore." The silence that followed was thick. Only the tick-tock of the clock and the murmur of the river could be heard. Vargas shifted restlessly, breathing heavily. "Tell me what you want. Money, public apologies, whatever. Don't destroy me like this." Ethan returned to his desk, picked up a sheet of paper, and held it out. It's already done. This termination letter has been sent to all our partners. Your companies have lost access to our distribution chains, and your name will appear in court records before the end of the week. Not for Olivia, but for your other deceptions. I have everything I need to prove it. Vargas collapsed into a chair, his hands on his head. This ruins me. Ethan interrupted him with a low voice, almost a whisper. It doesn't ruin you, Damon. It exposes you. What you were was already rotten. I'm just removing the veneer. The businessman looked up, his eyes bloodshot with rage. And you think this will make you feel better? It won't change what happened. Ethan nodded slowly. I know, but it will change what comes next. Olivia will walk through Richmond without fear again, and you will have nowhere to hide your shame. Lucia entered with an envelope. Sir, the confirmation just arrived. The tax inspection was moved up. The authorities are at the Vargas warehouses. Ethan took the document and placed it on the desk, not looking at his visitor. Vargas paled. That too. Damn you, Ethan. You don't know who you're messing with, Ethan replied without raising his voice. With a man who forgot what it means to be human. Vargas stood up, staggering. Sweat beaded on his forehead. This won't stand, he growled, and left, slamming the door. Lucia watched him from the doorway. Should I call security? Ethan shook his head. Let him go. Sometimes the fall is the best lesson. Silence returned to the office. Ethan walked to the window, rested his hands on the cold frame, and breathed deeply. The midday light reflected on the river water, creating glimmers that looked like ghosts. On the desk, the Vargas documents awaited his final signature. He took the pen, traced his signature with a precise movement, and closed the folder. It was done. He looked at a framed photograph on the bookshelf. He and Olivia at a summer fair, smiling under the colored lights. He ran his fingers over the glass, her smile shining even in memory. He realized that his revenge, though just, did not bring him peace. Only a strange sense of emptiness, as if in tearing down the culprit, he had also broken a part of himself. He sat down in silence, elbows on the desk, his gaze fixed on the horizon. From there, the James River continued its course, indifferent to the triumphs and ruins of men. Ethan sighed, tired, and murmured barely audibly, It's done. But I still don't know if I feel better. Part 7. The Seeds of Repentance. Damon Vargas looked at himself in the mirror of his empty office and did not recognize the man staring back. The room, which once smelled of power and expensive scotch, was now a museum of defeat. Open boxes, scattered files, phones that no longer rang. Outside, the summer sun over Richmond beat against the windows like a mockery. Vargas wore the same suit that had made him feel invincible a week earlier, but now it was wrinkled, with sweat stains on the collar. He ran a hand over his face, his eyes red, his beard grown out, and whispered, I lost everything. The word everything echoed in the empty room, too large for such a small man. He tried to turn on his computer, but the screen only showed an error message. He had received a call from the bank that morning. Accounts frozen. Then, a letter from the court, announcing a tax investigation. Suppliers canceled contracts. Partners vanished. Employees didn't show up for work. In a matter of hours, his empire had crumbled into dust. He poured a glass of wine, smelled it, and suddenly the aroma made him nauseous. He left it on the table without tasting it. He walked to the window. From there, he could see the James River, the same river where years ago he had celebrated his triumphs with fireworks. Now, everything was silent. The office door opened without a knock. It was his wife, Carol, a woman of mature beauty, dressed simply. She carried a folder of documents. I'm here for the divorce papers, she said calmly. Vargas blinked, as if he didn't understand. What are you saying? She looked at him without rancor, but without compassion. I can't be with you anymore. I'm ashamed of what you did. Humiliating a pregnant woman. What kind of monster have you become? Vargas tried to defend himself. It was a mistake, Carol. An impulse. All men lose control sometimes. She shook her head slowly. No, Damon. All men lose control, yes. But not all men enjoy it. You did. And when I saw you on the news with that video, I realized I didn't want to live in your shadow anymore. She walked to the door, paused, and added, I wish you luck, but what I wish most is that someday you look in the mirror and see who you really are. Then she left, leaving behind a faint scent of perfume and farewell. Vargas slumped into the chair, closing his eyes. In his head, the party laughter, the toasts, the flattery, all mixed with the dry thud of his foot against Olivia's body. That scene haunted him. He tried to justify it again, but the image of the woman thrown on the floor, hands over her belly, disarmed him. He slammed his fist on the desk. Stop! He yelled, but only his voice came back as a hollow echo. He decided to leave. He walked aimlessly through the Shockoe bottom streets, his shirt collar open. People looked at him and whispered. Some recognized him, the man from the video. An older woman pointed to him with her fan and commented to her friend, Look, that's the businessman who hit the pregnant woman. Vargas quickened his pace, shame burning his skin. He walked past his most famous restaurant, the Gilded Vine. It was closed, the shutters down, a sign on the door that read, Temporary inspection. He pounded on the glass in rage, but no one answered. Inside, the tables covered with white sheets looked like sleeping ghosts. He sat on a bench facing the river. The wind messed up his hair. A guitar played mournfully in the distance. He pulled out his phone, turned it on. Dozens of unread messages, press headlines, comments, insults, businessman accused of assault and fraud, the fall of the downtown mogul, the gala abuser. He turned it off again. He didn't want to read anymore. He looked at the water, gray and slow. What have I done with my life? He whispered. His voice trembled. A young man passing by on a bicycle looked at him and recognized him. Hey, mister, are you the guy from TV? Vargas didn't answer. The boy smiled with disdain. Well, now it's your turn to learn what it's like to be down and out, huh? And rode away laughing. Vargas lowered his head. There was no trace left of the man who once walked among senators and bankers. Now, he was just a cursed man. The sun began to set, staining the sky orange. He stood up and walked toward the Mayo Bridge. He leaned on the railing, looking at the water's reflection. The river kept flowing, indifferent. He thought about jumping. For an instant, the idea was clear, almost sweet. But something inside him stopped him. Carol's voice, telling him to look in the mirror. He couldn't die without doing that first. He got off the bridge and walked toward the other side. The neighborhood street smelled of fresh bread and soap. On the corner, he saw a sign that caught his attention. The Vega Foundation for Dignity, Aid, and Reintegration. He stopped in front of the door. A group of young people was unloading boxes of food. A woman offered him a brochure. Interested in volunteering or receiving help? He didn't know what to say. I don't know, he said in a husky voice. The woman smiled naturally. Then come inside. That's something you decide later. Vargas watched her leave and looked down at the brochure. On it was a simple phrase. No one is lost if they can still repent. He read it several times, feeling a strange weight in his chest. He put the paper in his pocket and stood there, still. As the evening faded completely, the river wind carried the scent of honeysuckle and distant rain. Vargas sat back down on the bench, head in his hands. He no longer thought about money, power, or reputation. Only about the minimal possibility of starting over. For the first time in his life, he cried without hiding. The tears came down slowly, mixing with the dust of failure. He looked up at the sky and murmured, If there is a God, give me a chance to do one thing right before I die. The city lit up slowly. The lights reflected in the James River looked like flares of hope. Vargas took a deep breath. He put the brochure in the inner pocket of his coat and stood up. He didn't know where to go, but at least he had taken a step toward repentance, even if the road was long and no one waited for him at the end. Part 8. A New Heartbeat. 3 months later, the cry of a baby filled the hospital room. It was a clean, round sound, like a bell announcing life. Olivia held him in her arms, her face illuminated by a smile that mixed exhaustion and peace. "Ethan, he looks just like you," she said in a thread of a voice, while her husband, standing by the bed, looked at his son with shining eyes. The little one slept peacefully, wrapped in a white blanket. Outside, the spring sun streamed through the window of St. Jude's Medical Center, caressing the curtains, and the smell of disinfectant mixed with the scent of flowers left by doctors and nurses. Ethan rested a hand on Olivia's shoulder. "Now, everything was worth it," he murmured. She looked at him and nodded. It had been a difficult labor, but in the end, everything was fine. The baby breathed deeply, and his heart, according to the doctors, was strong. "What should we name him?" Olivia asked. Ethan smiled, stroking one of the tiny hands. "We'll decide together once we get home," he replied. In that instant, they both felt that finally, the weight of the past was dissolving into the air. A nurse entered with the tray and a gentle smile. "Congratulations, Mrs. Vega. You were brave. Few women endure so much without losing their calm." Olivia thanked her with a shy smile. "I couldn't have done it without him," she said, looking at Ethan. The nurse left the medicines on the table and added in a knowing tone, "And without a little faith, sometimes faith is the best anesthetic." Then she left, leaving the door ajar. Silence returned, a silence filled with tenderness. Ethan leaned in to kiss his wife's forehead, but a slight knock on the door interrupted the moment. A man entered with a dark blue uniform, cap in hand, his face aged by fatigue. Olivia recognized him immediately. It was Damon Vargas. She froze, surprised, and pressed the baby against her chest. Ethan took a step forward, his expression hardening. "What are you doing here?" Vargas lowered his head. His voice sounded muffled. "I didn't come to bother. I work here, in security. I just wanted to—" He paused for a second before finishing the sentence. "I just wanted to see you and apologize." Ethan looked at him coldly. "You have no business in this room." Vargas nodded, without lifting his gaze. "I know, but I had to say it. I lost everything. My company, my family, my friends. I deserve it, but what weighs on me most is not the ruin, but what I did. I have thought every day about you, ma'am, about your fear, your pain. There is no night I don't hear the sound of that kick in my head. I'm not seeking forgiveness. I'm seeking to understand why I was capable of doing it." Olivia took a deep breath. Instinct told her she should be angry, that she should order him out. But something in the man's voice stopped her. It was a voice empty of arrogance, broken by guilt. "Mr. Vargas," she finally said, "I cannot give you back what you lost, nor can you give me back the peace of that night. But I can tell you something. Life always leaves a door ajar. If you truly want to change, walk through that door." Vargas lifted his eyes, and for the first time, they were not those of a powerful man, but those of a defeated person seeking redemption. "I've started to do it," he confessed. "I work nights at the hospital. I'm in therapy. They told me that dignity begins in small actions. Every day, I clean the hallway floors, and when I do it, I think about cleaning what I also soiled inside myself." Ethan watched him in silence, arms crossed, breathing controlled. Part of him wanted to expel him. Another part understood that this encounter was not an offense, but a lesson. Olivia looked at him, seeking his reaction. He sighed and said, "I don't know if I believe you, Vargas, but at least I see that you're not hiding anymore. That's something." The man nodded. "I just wanted to see you smile, ma'am, to know your son as well. That's enough for me." Olivia looked at him, and an unexpected calm softened her face. "He is well, and you should try to be well too. Not for me, but for yourself." Vargas lowered his head. "Thank you for listening to me. No one has for months." Ethan walked to the door, opened it, and said in a serene voice, "Go now. You have work to do." The man stiffened slightly, almost with a military gesture, and before leaving, he murmured, "God bless you, and may your son grow up without knowing the arrogance that destroyed me." When the door closed, silence filled the room again. Olivia looked at her husband, who still had a frown. "Why did you let him in?" "Because sometimes, to close a wound, you have to look it in the face," she replied. Ethan approached, stroked her cheek. "You're too kind," he said, with a mix of admiration and sadness. "No, I just want to live in peace, and you can't have peace without forgiveness." The baby stirred, making a small noise, as if approving the conversation. They both laughed softly. "Looks like he already has an opinion," Olivia said. "He will be a strong man," Ethan replied, looking at him with pride. "And he'll learn from you that strength isn't in hitting, it's in healing." They spent a few minutes in silence, contemplating the child. From the window, they could see Richmond bathed in sun, cars passing on the avenue, life continuing. Olivia felt immense gratitude for life, for the opportunity to start anew. She remembered the months of fear, the hospital days, the sleepless nights, and thought that everything had been worth it for this moment. A nurse knocked on the door and poked her head in. "Everything okay, ma'am?" "Yes." "Yeah, very well, thank you." The nurse smiled. "So good to see you like this. You'll be going home soon." As the door closed, the air in the room felt lighter. Ethan sat next to the bed and took his wife's hand. "I promise, this child will grow up surrounded by love, not pride. I will do whatever it takes to make sure he never feels alone." Olivia rested her head on the pillow, tired but serene. "We don't need much, Ethan, just that love and calm." He squeezed her hand, looking at her tenderly. "The world can keep the rest." The afternoon advanced. The sun entered obliquely, gilding the walls. The baby slept, and the silence was so perfect, it seemed like a prayer. In that instant, Ethan understood that justice was no longer about punishing, but about protecting, and that forgiveness, even if it hurt, was the only way to save what was still standing. Ethan, looking at this baby, whispered, "Maybe there's hope even for him." Olivia smiled, and for the first time in months, the fear completely disappeared. Outside, the Richmond sky was tinged with a clean blue, as if the world, too, wanted to begin anew. Part 9. The Dawn of Forgiveness. 2 weeks later, Olivia left the hospital with her baby in her arms and a new smile that seemed to restore her youth. Ethan waited for her in front of the main entrance, holding a bouquet of flowers, his eyes damp. "Welcome home," he said, and she replied with a look that said everything. Spring had filled Richmond with color. The streets smelled of lilac, and the deep blue sky seemed to promise peaceful days. In the car, as they drove toward their house in the Fan District, Olivia watched the windows, the squares full of life, the terraces with people drinking coffee, children chasing pigeons. Everything looked different, brighter, as if after so much pain, the world had decided to be kind again. When they arrived, the house was decorated with fresh flowers and colorful ribbons. Close neighbors, a few friends, and even the nurse who had attended the birth were there. Carlos, the waiter who had helped her that night, was also there, standing at the door with a basket of fruits. "I couldn't miss it," he said. With his simple smile, Olivia was touched. "Thank you, Carlos. If it weren't for you—" He interrupted her with a gentle gesture. "Don't say that, ma'am. We all have a duty to help. You've already paid too much in suffering. Now it's your turn to live." The baby slept in his bassinet, and the air was filled with soft conversations, contained laughter, and background music. Ethan served coffee to the guests, thanking each one for their support. Olivia's mother, who had flown in from Miami, hugged her daughter tightly. "Your father would be so proud of you," she whispered. Olivia closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of the embrace. For the first time, she didn't feel sorrow remembering her father, but gratitude. When everyone left, and the house fell silent, Olivia walked to the balcony. From there, she could see the city skyline, brilliant under the light of the setting sun. Ethan came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her. "What are you thinking?" he asked. She smiled without looking away from the horizon. "I'm thinking that no pain lasts forever, and that if you learn something from it, it stops being a wound and becomes a lesson." Ethan rested his chin on her shoulder. "That you're stronger than you think?" "No," she replied with tenderness. "Just that I learned to stop being afraid." That night, when the baby woke up to eat, Olivia took him in her arms and rocked him by the window. The silence was so deep that she could hear the distant footsteps of people returning from the evening downtown. The little one opened his eyes, dark like his mother's. "Look, my love, that is the world you are going to grow up in," she whispered. "And I promise you it will be a more just world." Ethan, from the doorway, watched the scene with a tired smile. That image, Olivia with their son under the Richmond moonlight, was living proof that even after chaos, life could be reborn. The next morning, they received an unexpected letter. It was from the Community Reintegration Center, signed by Vargas. It said that he had started volunteering with the foundation that helped victims of violence, giving talks each week about responsibility and repentance. In the envelope was also a small handwritten note. "Thank you for not hating me. Your forgiveness saved me." Olivia read it in silence and left it on the table. Ethan looked at her with a mix of astonishment and respect. "Are you going to answer him?" "His life will be the answer," she said. The days passed quietly. Ethan returned to his work, but with a different pace. He was no longer the cold businessman who measured time in contracts and profits. Now, he came home early. He spent time with the baby, accompanied Olivia on walks through Maymont Park. The fountains and gardens seemed more alive, and the city more human. On one of those afternoons, while they watched children run under the lilacs, Olivia said, "You know, I think life gave us a second chance." Ethan squeezed her hand. "And this time, we won't waste it." A week later, they organized a small baptism at the historic church in the Fan District. It was a simple ceremony, with few guests, but full of emotion. Carlos was the godfather, and when the priest poured the holy water on the child's forehead, everyone felt that something within them was also being purified. Olivia couldn't help but cry. "It's like all the pain is behind us," she whispered. Ethan hugged her. "It is. Today, our new life truly begins." After the ceremony, they walked along the river. The air smelled of fresh baked bread, and the sound of a guitar drifted from an open window. The baby slept in the stroller, rocked by the breeze. Olivia stopped for a moment, watching the water sparkle under the sun. "Sometimes I think about Vargas," she said softly. Ethan nodded. "Me too, but not with resentment. I believe his punishment was sufficient." She looked at him, smiled. Perhaps it was his way of being reborn. We all deserve one. Final thought and call to action. The story of Olivia and Ethan is not about perfection. It's about redemption. Ethan learned that true power is born not from pride, but from the courage to forgive. Olivia discovered that forgiveness is not a weakness, but a profound form of freedom. And even Damon Vargas, the man who embodied arrogance, found a sliver of dignity in the simple act of acknowledging his wrongs. In each of them, suffering became a door opened toward humanity, reminding us that all of us, no matter how far we've fallen, can choose to rebuild what we once destroyed. Perhaps that is the deepest lesson of this story. There is no past so dark that it cannot be illuminated by an act of kindness. The scars on the soul, when healed with truth, become the roots that anchor us to life. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to remember that there is always time to start anew. And tell us in the comments below, what is the most difficult thing you've ever had to forgive? Your story matters. Until next time.